All right, we've seen better than 4,000 flight delays, cancellations because of the nasty weather up and down the East Coast, but nothing like what was going on around a year ago at this time, around the Christmas time period with Southwest. That company having to pay a $140 million fine to make sure something like that doesn't happen again. The Transportation Secretary of the United States, Pete Buttigieg, with us. Secretary, good to have you. How are we handling today's mess?
Today there's definitely a lot of weather having an effect, but should be something that the airlines will be able to work through. Definitely encourage anybody with travel plans to frequently check in with your airline. Of course, a year ago we had a major storm, but the outcome was different. Every airline was knocked back, but all of the airlines recovered relatively quickly, except one. That was Southwest Airlines. And after that meltdown, I made clear that we were going to be putting them under a microscope, making sure they took care of passengers with refunds and reimbursements, and investigating what happened so that we could hold them accountable. Today, we're announcing that that investigation is complete. It's resulted in a record enforcement action and penalty of $35 million in cash and $140 million in total value. That's really designed not just for accountability over what happened with Southwest, but to send a message to the entire airline industry to take care of your passengers or be held accountable.
What does that mean, though, Secretary, when we talk about taking care of passengers? Of course, there are acts of God and storms and flooding and all the rest, and then something that an airline, in the case of Southwest, was ill-prepared to address and didn't have people in the right place at the right time. It sort of was a domino effect. So what is their responsibility?
Yeah, I'll give you some examples. So our investigation found that customers were not able to get someone on the phone, sometimes having to wait for hours. And the only thing more frustrating than getting to the airport, finding out your flight was canceled, was taking hours to get anybody on the line from the airline who could tell you what was going to happen next. Another example is notifications that a flight was canceled, something an airline should tell you as soon as they know. But in this case, the system had broken down so completely at Southwest Airlines that passengers left their homes not knowing their flights were already canceled and only found out once they got to the airport. These are examples of things that airlines are responsible for handling. Look, we don't want to be unfair about this. We know that nobody controls the weather, but airlines are responsible for their own systems, their own treatment of passengers. That's part of what led to this record enforcement action. Now, as I said, there's $35 million in a fine, but the majority of that penalty is actually going to be paid to passengers. The way it works is that for the next 3 years, Southwest will be required to pay an additional $75 in vouchers or credits to any passenger who experiences a cancellation or major delay, up to $90 million. That's something that is designed to make sure that some of the value of this enforcement action, most of the value of this enforcement action, is going not to the U.S. Treasury, but to passengers who will benefit going forward. And again, changing the incentives so that airlines know that you can't cut corners and you shouldn't allow anything to happen that would leave you vulnerable to this kind of meltdown. What happened a year ago with Southwest should never happen again.
If I could switch gears ever quickly, we only have about a minute left. I apologize, Secretary, but you, of course, have been talking about incentives for electric vehicles and the like. Americans seem to be resisting. Some of the automakers seem to be pushing back their own EV plans. Are you worried, especially given the draw of, let's say, vehicles that offer you a little bit of both, the hybrid type vehicle, that's the way to go?
Well, I do think the hybrid type vehicles have a place. As a matter of fact, that's what my family uses, a plug-in hybrid minivan. The way it works is it kind of runs electric the first 30 or 40 miles, then it kicks over to the gas engine. For some families, that's going to be the right answer, at least for the medium term. That said, demand for electric vehicles has led to over 1 million in sales. The share of EVs has roughly tripled over the last few years. We see that trend continuing. But look, this is a process, right? The goal is that by the end of this decade, about half of the new cars are EVs. Our policy is to keep pushing to lower the cost of those EVs, to make sure that you can find chargers when you need them, and to make sure that they're made in America.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.